Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I recently typed strange howling in the woods at night in Yadkin County, North Carolina after listening to different fox sounds for the past 8 hours and being unable to find a 100% match to satisfy me that a fox was indeed what I've been hearing, and your site was the very first hit on the list. Let me tell you, I 100% believe that anything is possible. I am a firm believer in the supernatural from first-hand experiences. I believe in aliens, just not the little green men from the movies. With all that open space and all those galaxies, you're pretty damned ignorant if you think our small corner of all that is the only life-sustaining place. But Bigfoot is something I've always found silly. I moved to the small town of East Bend, North Carolina 12 years ago. My husband's family is from out here. I'm a former Air Force brat and needless to say, not much of a nature girl. So there are plenty of sights and sounds that are out of my comfort zone. After 12 years though, I've heard and seen enough of them that I am pretty comfortable with and feel safe in my surroundings. I worked third shift until recently and have always been a night owl, so I keep different hours from the norm. Last night makes 4 times, since about a month ago, that I have heard a very unsettling noise that I am having a hard time putting into words. It's been around 11 or 12 p.m. 3 times and 2 or 3 a.m. once. It's a series of almost ape, monkey-type sounds, then a whooping-type howl that sounds a lot like an ambulance siren. My husband heard it the second night I did back in mid-October, and likened it to a recording that would be played for Halloween. We have woods behind and beside us. Also here recently on a couple different occasions when my usually very chill and quiet pit bull has been left outside. What has alerted me to the fact she was not inside was her standing at the corner of the yard right behind my bathroom where the woods are barking and growling her "this ain't cool" alarm that she very rarely if ever does. This lets me know it's not a cat or rabbit or something she's familiar with. It wasn't, however, on a night I also heard that. There are a few other things that come into play here. I'm trying really hard not to let my imagination run wild. Okay, so first, back during the summer on more than one occasion while sitting in the chair I sit in at night in the corner of my room, there's a small window behind it. It's that clouded, textured glass you can't see through. However, it's one of those old crank open windows and the crank broke, so the outer part of it stays open unless I pull it shut manually. So while it's a good 2 feet above head level for a tall man, my husband is 6'3". If you had a ladder or were super tall you would be able to look under the slats and see in. There's a curtain over it too, but it's semi-sheer. Anyway, at least 3 different times on different nights within a couple weeks while sitting there reading or on my phone or whatever, out of nowhere I was overcome with this paralyzing fear and feeling of someone or something was behind me watching me. For whatever reason I cannot explain, since as I stated I have never bought into Bigfoot, that's exactly what picture flashed in my mind. I'm very in tune spiritually, as is my husband. No, I can't tell the future. Although multiple dreams I have had have later happened. I'm not some bells and whistles run-of-the-mill gypsy. But I am very aware, so to speak. So when I get a feeling like that I fully believe it. While I'm telling myself how silly I'm being, and asking myself WTF, I've been reading to make me picture a Sasquatch, and trying my best to either get up and walk to my bed on the other side of the wall, or turn around and open the curtain and see for myself that there's nothing there. I literally couldn't move nor quell my fears. I finally jumped up and sprinted to the bed, almost falling because my legs would barely hold me. Now here's what really tripped me out. About 3 weeks after the last time that happened to me, one night my husband, mind you I have not spoken of any of this to anyone. I mean, it's ridiculous, is it not? Begins telling me about how several nights prior when I had been asleep and proceeds word for word, feeling for feeling, I kid you not. Explain my exact same scenario down to the picture of a Bigfoot. This was hard for him to say, even to me, as he is an extremely practical man. He's very open to things and knows anything is possible, but he's not into sci-fi or anything like that. Bigfoot isn't up his alley either, is what I'm getting at. We just stared at each other in a moment of disbelief when I told him the same thing had happened to me. But we have had quite a handful of similar, and spiritual, not humanly explainable situations over 14 years, so it wasn't brought up again. I've saved this for last because I didn't want it to taint your feelings or opinions in any way about my stories thus far. Ever since we've moved out here, all the cousins and second cousins have talked about Rawhide. One older lady told me several times, "There's a creature, pronounced seaweed, or you gotta get the full picture here, in those woods," talking about the ones around me. Her grandfather and my husband's great-grandfather used to own all of the land around me. He broke it up among his kids and the part I live on has been passed down. So supposedly back in the day, this being sometime in the 80s or 90s. I think there was something running wild, I guess you'd say, in these parts. Apparently livestock and pets were disappearing, some found ripped completely to shreds and scattered a ways away later. I can't remember all the details, but basically they all swear it was a Bigfoot and Granddaddy shot it one night. And it took the hair off its hind end that apparently never grew back. Supposedly there were a few more sightings over the next few years and they all say he was sporting a bald spot. But now mind you, Granddaddy also did time in a Tallahassee prison for running quite the moonshine operation in those woods as well. I can't say what he saw nor if I'd believe it coming from him, I never met him. But coming from these drunken fools I was thinking just that all these sightings were being told by so and so to so and so and they're all known drunks and it's probably just old tales told to scare the kids. Granddaddy was a little rough around the edges and thought teaching kids there was nothing to fear by scaring the living shit out of them was hysterical to him, and a favorite pastime. Again, here's the part that right now more so than the night he told me trips me the hell out. My father-in-law's brother, opposite side of the family. Less crazy, more class, blue-collar hard-working man, very quiet. Certainly not one to make up or go along with tales as he barely speaks and is too honorable a person to lie, especially one so extravagant. My husband told me a very different take on this whole thing. They were living in Roanoke while all this was going on. His dad was a Norfolk Southern engineer, they were home on vacation as they did often. He's talking to his cousin and she's crying and telling him about how their horses have been going absolutely nuts at night, stomping and whinnying. Her dog went missing and they found its leg and a couple bones in the field. He later overhears their dads and Granny talking about it again. Granny would smack someone for spreading some nonsense, and she was just as engaged in the talk. His uncle is telling his dad that one night the previous week when the horses started up he grabbed his shotgun. This was after the dog, and this is the country, and started out to see what it was in the window cut out of the door stood a very large ape-like man with red eyes. Said he never appeared aggressive, just stood there looking at him. They kept eye contact for a minute or so, and then he slowly turned and walked away and into the tree line. Had I heard that from anyone else, well you now know how I'd react, were you high? Drunk? I put it out of my head over the years as this was all a long time ago. There's no telling what all happened, but I've lived in the area this long and haven't heard, or seen anything that couldn't be explained or that gave me reason to think it was anything more than a local urban legend. I'd all but forgotten about it honestly. Last week something happened. I don't know what. Something silly, and my husband jokingly said Rawhide's back. 2 nights ago my son came tearing into my room around midnight. He's almost 13 and a big boy, not over easily frightened. Maybe it was because it seemed much closer this time, so the sheer volume coupled with a very strange and unfamiliar sound from something seemingly right outside our bedrooms. I get it. He and I were the only ones awake. It happened twice, several seconds apart, with the first seeming a lot further away. If you read all of this, my friend, I applaud and thank you. It's not a sighting nor any kind of proof of anything. The river is about 2 miles from my house, I meant to mention that. I don't know, man. All I know is that some weird things have been going on. I've never heard that sound and I cannot find a clip to match it. And way too many things are falling into place for my comfort. So there's my story. If you care to know if anything else goes down, let me know and I will gladly oblige. Maybe between us we can figure this out. Or maybe I should stop telling myself my gut and intuition are wrong when they never are.
I was canoeing on the Yadkin River with a friend last week. We were about halfway downstream from the canoe launch at Shoals Road north of East Bend, North Carolina, about 8 a.m. I noticed something dark and hairy hunched down in weeds and bushes on the north bank of the river. As we passed, it stood up and ran into the woods. We got a good look at it and sure it was a Bigfoot, about 7 feet tall and very thick hair all around the body. Surprised how agile it was because the bank from the bushes into the woods was very steep. We turned the canoe around and got closer to the river edge. It was very muddy and I think the Bigfoot had been in the river. Not much more to say. I believe there is a group of them in the area because I have heard of others on the river seeing Bigfoot, usually in Davie County. Our sighting was in Yadkin County and the state park nearby also has had sightings.
I live in west central North Carolina. I live at a location that is very close to the Yadkin River in Davie County. The river's floodplain comes to my property line in a valley with no houses and heavily wooded. However, 2 roads to cross to get to my house. The river's edge is primarily undeveloped, with almost a 300-yard flood area clearance on both sides for miles and miles. This river floods regularly, but not very much lately. There are high-voltage power lines running across the area as well. Now that the stage is set, let's go. We have also put a game camera out to see if we could catch anything on it. We so far have caught a fat pregnant deer, several raccoons, and a gray fox. That pregnant deer has twins now in our garden. The deer are pretty thick around here. This is not a hotbed of Bigfoot sightings. But I have been hearing something very large walking in the woods beside my house. My dog has been kicked by something and knocked out for a few seconds. All we heard that night was a thud as it sounded like he was kicked in the side. We saw nothing as it was around 11:30 p.m. on a moonless night. A few moments later, he was up chasing a scent down the neighbor's field. My son grabbed his flashlight and looked around down at the wood line and caught a pair of large red-orange eyes reflection. We went down later to investigate where they were. There is an opening right where he saw the eyes. We determined that whatever it was had to stand about 4 feet tall or so if it was standing in the field and 9 feet tall if it was standing in the woods, as the opening has a steep drop off to the tree he used as a reference spot. The last explanation is that whatever it is was in the tree at that level. We are hunters and spend time in the woods often. We have never seen a pair of red-orange eyes around here. Not sure what a bear's eyes look like, but we have no bear population around here. I often stay up very late and go outside to look around with the flashlight around 3 or 4 in the morning. I have heard on 3 occasions a very loud knock following my spotlighting around. It sounds like 2 large rocks being hit together, not like a rock hitting a tree. They have come from 3 different spots down in the backyard in the woods. The knock sounds are only heard about once every 8 to 12 days. Kind of like whatever it is only passes through this area on some kind of schedule. Not sure if that sounds logical? I have only on one occasion heard what I would call a howl. It was in the distance and was not a coyote. Not even close. It was a different tone and lasted too long. I would love to hear a logical explanation for all of this.
I live several miles upriver from where this event took place. I am approximately 4 miles from the Yadkin River, but at night on occasion I have heard the tree knocking, the howls, but I have never seen one or saw a track. I have a tendency to stay out of the woods at night in the summertime due to copperheads and poison ivy. When I first started hearing the howls, it happened on a regular basis from about 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. At first I thought it could have been some type of owl, but that didn't match up. One day I was looking at an investigation that had been done in upstate New York when they started to play the howling sounds that had been recorded from a possible Bigfoot encounter, and it was exactly like I heard. My dogs also have been at times seriously pissed at something in the woods across the road from my house, and keeping them from going after it is almost impossible.
I live between Advance, North Carolina and the Yadkin River, and I can say that I have experienced related noises that include wood knocking and weird howls. I also caught a glimpse of a large man-like beast in the Eureka Mills area last fall while canoeing. This thing rose up from the brush in a clearing. I was about 50 feet from the bank and it was another 50 feet off the shore. It dashed off so quick I barely saw it, but I know it wasn't a deer, bear or human. I have heard stories of sightings, but people around here kind of keep these things quiet. One of my friend's neighbors down the road from me had a heavy metal sliding door ripped off his barn a few months ago. He said that one of his goats was also carried off. He called the local police, who came out and saw large footprints in the mud. That incident never made any news. There is something moving up and down the river as far as I'm concerned.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.